Ever wondered why your paintings just look messy, muddy, or just like you just don't seem to love it as much? What if I told you it may not be your fault? I'm going to share with you top 10 most biggest common mistakes that watercolor beginners make, and I want to share the solutions for each of these to help you out. At the end, I'll be sharing a bonus tip that I think I'm still trying to grasp and I'm still trying to learn, but I know once I really grasp it, this is going to change a whole lot in my watercolor journey. I thought I'd share this because when I was just starting watercolor 5 years ago, my great friend who unfortunately passed away, he used to mention like, oh, you need more control, Miwa. You haven't got the control right. And I was just like, I'm such a contrarian. I was just like, just get out of my way, you know. But anyways, I learned a lesson. Like I gradually had to learn each stage, you know. One time, the first thing that I realized looking from a lot of the videos that were helpful on YouTube, thank you to the creators, a lot of them mention about getting a really high quality watercolor paint before when you start, because it makes a big difference. So that's one of the things I learned. And then second, I learned that brushes do matter. The third that I learned while I was doing daily painting was that paper mattered and so forth. So let's dive into all of these things. I like to go through the order that I learned these things firsthand. So is low quality paint. Now, I never bought low quality paint. This is the first watercolor that I ever got. Well, I did get a watercolor pencils first, but that's not really watercolor, so to speak. I mean, they are, but they're like in a different format. But those were even Derwent. So I've never bought any cheap watercolor paint. I think that was like a good investment that I did. I did save up quite a lot of money to be like, okay, I'm buying it. So these were what I started off with. They're Schmincke. They're like a German brand and top tier brand for watercolor. There's artist grade and so forth. You can just save up your money. I know it's difficult, but save up your money, even get it secondhand or something. And you might say, but why? Why? It's because, let me tell you, they can come very chalky if they're cheap. Basically, they would have like more whites, chalk in the paint. So when you say artist grade material, they have very strong pigmentation. Basically, for the cheap ones that are below that, which could be student grade or even not student grade, they usually come with a lot of whites added, and the amount of that becomes less and less as you go into the hierarchy of expensive watercolor paint. So this one I got from Tiger. It's, as you can see from the colors that they have tons of white, right? These were bought for my son because he just loves painting. I've been painting since he was 1.5 years old, and we just love doing that. But I mean, it could be done. At the end of the day, if this is all you can afford, I mean, hallelujah, at least you can afford some kind of paint and you can play around with it. So, but you can tell the difference, like it's very soft, you know, and having that high quality just gives you a bit of punch, and you don't have to use so much. A bit of pigment goes a long way. So that is number one. So number two, you might be using brushes that don't work for watercolor. Now these are, I have tons of brushes, and this was the second thing I've learned while I was working with, because when I started off, I used to have tons of these. This one, it's the Winsor & Newton Professional Watercolor Sable Round. I had different sizes of this, but somehow whenever I was using these kept on flicking out bits of watercolor paint all around while I was working. I'll be like having to wipe it off and so forth. I don't know why, but I was like, this isn't just working. And then I bought the Da Vinci Casanio in different sizes. These are mop brushes, but I bought them and I realized, oh my God, okay, this is different. This is really good. And then I bought different watercolor brushes, and I have tons. Let me just show you. I have tons right here. I even have more. But to be honest with you, I had to kind of try out different brushes to know what works for me best. So I think this is something you may need to just like discover on your own. But I have a watercolor supply essential videos where I lay out all the supplies that I use on a daily basis when I paint. So if you're interested, please check that video. I have it at the end of this video as well for you to go to. One definite thing is use watercolor brushes. Like make sure it's watercolor brush. So this one is not quite a watercolor brush. It's Emily Hughes Craftsman brush. I use it for gouache. So what are the differences with like watercolor brush and say just like a brush of like other kinds like acrylic or oil? They hold much more water. So that's the key difference. You want to be able to hold as much water as possible so you can just glide it through the watercolor paper, because watercolor paper is made to absorb. So that's the key difference. So what is the fix? Explore with different brushes, I would say. I mean, that's not really solving the issue, but you'll definitely know once you start working with brushes what you want and what you don't want. And get brushes designed for watercolor. The next thing that I came to notice was paper. The third thing you may be doing is using poor quality paper. Now, this I learned on eventually while I was working. This wasn't my first sketchbook. I do have my sketchbook tour, 3 of my sketchbooks, but this was my second. The first one was the one that my friend Vong used to say, Miwa, you have to learn water control. It was partially, okay, let me tell you, partially, it's not an excuse, partially because it was not 100% cotton paper. It wasn't good quality paper. So what happened on my second sketchbook was like, okay, I want like 100% cotton paper is what I got. I think this was 100%. I wanted it to be a square format for Instagram, but basically this one didn't hold enough water. It wasn't too absorbent. I don't think it was as heavy. It's not like 300 GCM or anything. So that was a bit of a work to do, but it's totally fine. Maybe it wasn't even 100% cotton. I forgot. But anyways, it wasn't the perfect thing. But let me tell you, once I started working on this Etcher sketchbook, I was like, oh my God. This was like a total jump for me. I was like, okay, now we're talking, because I could layer, and even if you add too much water, it's okay. It buckles a bit, of course, but it's not as buckly as the other one. And it just saves so much of my time because I don't have to worry about so many bad things that the paper can potentially do. So it frees up. It frees up your artistic like exploration, let's say. It just frees it up. It gets you to loosen up, to try out different things. So I highly recommend that. These were the first, oh my God, they're terrible. This is 300 GCM, but it's not 100% cotton paper. So I'm struggling, I mean, it was okay. It was good at the beginning. I would say sometimes you just need to go through that whole process to even get to the point to understand how different things are. Because, I kind of went directly into good quality paints. I didn't know what's a bad quality paint, And eventually, when I used it with my son, I was like, oh, okay, now I get what that means. So yeah, you just need to try out. But still, I use this A4 300 GCM, but this is not 100% cotton. But I still use these to sketch out ideas, to do early stages of the sketches and stuff. So look at that. That's a full painting of my son that I did. But I'm still and that's a full painting as well. Using cheap paper, I would say, is kind of good to free up, to loosen up that thought that I don't want to touch that expensive paper because I don't think I'm not a good enough artist yet. That's okay. I mean, if that's how you feel, I would say that's what I did. I started off with this Canson and made tons of paintings, that I consider, oh, that was good. But I'm not oh, I wish I did it on expensive paper. I needed that time. I needed the time to work on this to then be able to go to things like Arches, Again, I have this my most used supplies in a different video, but I mean, I had to go through that stage to then free up. But now I definitely use tons of arches. Bao Hong is one, as well as like big sheets of paper to work on the final piece. So I do still work on my sketchbook at the early stage, expensive paper for, you know, sketches and stuff. But I mean, hey, maybe the next level that I become as an artist, I might be like, it doesn't matter. I need to have the same paper that I'll be using for my final piece, because I wouldn't know how it would like exactly look like, oh, relatively speaking, to the final piece. Because for the sketches, I do want to use the same paper that I'm finally going to be using on as the warm-ups and the small thumbnails as well, you know, because how the pigment kind of reacts on different surfaces and papers could be quite different and off. So that's something to think about. But at early stages, I would say just use anything you can reach out for. Maybe that is a learning stage, and maybe not consider it a mistake, so to speak. If you can, I would say the fix would be use 100% cotton paper, 300 GCM. It'll give you a peace of mind if you can. The fourth mistake is poor water control. Now, maybe I probably need to do a bit of a quick demonstration right here. Let's just use this. Okay, this is a bit murky, but let's get into it. So this I do demonstrate in my Skillshare class. So if you'd like to look at that, I'll have the link to that class down below. But basically, you have to understand how much water is in my paintbrush and how much water is in my palette, and how much water am I placing on the surface. So understanding how much water is working between this three places is very crucial. So say if I have, let's go with the color I love. So say I have too much water here, everywhere, creates more loss of control. The less water you have, the more control you have. What the palette helps to do, like a surface to mix, would be like to understand how much of the water and the pigment is right there before applying it to the surface that you're painting on. Here I can see that the pigment is very light. Okay, I'm gonna add a bit more pigment right here. It's getting darker. Let's add just a tiny pigment in there. It's getting darker. Let's squeeze out a bit of water right there. Let's make it even darker. And you start to understand the water, the pigment control. This is very important to understand. I have a whole class on that, but understanding this will really help you. I don't think I understood it at the first stages. I was just getting hang of it. So the fix is just to practice, keep practicing. You can even start off with the most heaviest pigmentation and then add a bit of water. Add a bit more water. And then what I still do typically is like I'll have a scrap of paper on the side while I'm like painting, and I'll like check to see here first and then apply it to the final painting paper, you know? So that's how you can also fix this to make sure you got the right pigment and water load. The fifth mistake you could be making is overworking the paper. This would happen even more when it's like a cheap paper, like not 100% cotton. Let's see if I have a good example right here. This could be a good example. Okay, this is butt ugly, so I really don't want to share this, but this is one example. So this is not 100% cotton paper. Do you see, like, I've overworked this area and it's just so ugly. basically what happened was, this is a figure drawing open studio that I go to, and I started painting and I realized the allocations of some areas were incorrect. So then I started overworking. Once you get into scrubbing a lot and overworking, it just loses the luminosity of how watercolor really shines. It's all about the transparency, right? So I realized that leaving a bit of whites and not overworking is quite crucial when it comes to, say, watercolor painting. This one has a lot of open space. It's not overworked. No areas are overworked, so it's very clean. But especially with these not 100% cotton paper, it's not able to hold up the paint and the water that you're using on top of it, because it's not like a rag, it's not strong enough to hold on all to those layers that you're adding. Whereas like 100% cotton will. So you have to be mindful when you're not using 100% cotton paper to not overwork an area and kind of move to other areas to work on and let it dry. That's very important, probably. So the fix would be work in light layers and stop before the paper gets damaged, and let the layers dry as well. That's very important. Sixth mistake is not adapting to the environment. Nobody really talks about this. Nobody. So maybe it's because I've moved to different countries and I've realized how much of a difference it makes. I've lived in Beijing, which was quite dry. So with dry air, it makes paint dry faster, right? That can cause harsh edges. Whereas when I moved to Singapore after Beijing, there's a lot of humidity. It's like 86 plus 90s, right? So then what happens is that humidity slows the drying. So it's really good for blending, but you'll have to wait more time if you want to do those glazes and layer on top of the painting that you've done. And there's a lot that goes to understanding how wet the surface that you're working on, like how dry is it, how wet is it, what's the wet surface stage. I forgot there was a really good website that they talked about the drying stages and how you can check by having a source of white light coming through, so you can see and you can allocate how damp or wet or whatever the terms were, to then understand that what that does when you add, say, water or pigment. And that kind of test is really good to do. So it's really good to understand, say, scientifically what happens when in your environment that you live in, to understand those stages and what adding watercolor pigment or water to those stages means, how it'll affect it. So the fix is really understanding your environment, doing a test to see like how long it takes in this temperature in a different season and so forth, and understanding how adding a pigment, how adding a water in different stages looks like, and how fast they dry or how slow they dry would be a very important thing to understand. So the next mistake you may be making is dirty water and or palette. So this is the palette that I often use, and this is the water base that I often use. And things could look muddy. Now, with me, I just love using whatever is on the palette. I don't mind mixing in colors, muddying it, because I love desaturated colors, and there's something about the mutedness of a color that I love. So it doesn't really bug me at all. I can use this like as dirty as it is, and I wouldn't mind how it comes. But for some people who are like botanical artists, or who like that strong phthalo blue, high chroma look, or quinacridone corals, quinacridone burnt orange, and so forth. So if you're one of those that really love high saturated colors, this might be the cause of why you're feeling like you don't love your painting. It might be that you're mudding up your colors a bit too much. The fix would be make sure your water is clean, your palette is cleaned up, and also another fixing tip would be make sure your colors are next to each other. That kind of go around the color wheel. So I've started here from whites to yellows, and then to oranges to reds, and then again from here the reddish purples to the violets to the blues, and then to the greens, and then to the neutrals. So that's how I lay out my palette, because when you're mixing colors, you don't want them to be, say, I don't want the reds to be close to the complement to the opposite color of, which is the greens, to be next to each other, because it's more likely they're gonna dull the color down and you'll have those muddy colors, so to speak. So be careful of that. The number 8 mistake that you might be making is lack of planning. I know. Sometimes you want to go intuitive and stuff, but it's really good to have some sense of planning. But watercolor does also reward a lot of spontaneity. But with watercolor, you probably know we can't edit things. We can't go back. We can't delete. Well, at least to some extent we can, but that's the general idea, right? Also, we're working not from dark to light like oil paintings, but we are working from light to dark. We are going in the lightest and then creating those darks. So it's really important that you plan things out. This is like what my planning kind of looks like. I've kind of done a few thumbnails and so forth until I got into the main painting. So it's really crucial that you plan things out in small scale and build up from there, and even do like underlying sketches to then help you know where to place your certain colors and whatnot and start building that painting. So planning, I think, is crucial. Some people go with total spontaneity, like with the figure drawing open studio that I go, these are not planned, but I do. The planning that looks like there is when I look at the model and I'll be doing like this and checking what kind of composition I'm gonna go for, and I do think about what is going to be the most important visual element that I want to place on the paper. So for this lady that I worked on, it was the coat that she was wearing and how orangey and light it was, but with these blue tones where the shadows were hitting. And I just wanted to create this like warm but ghostly look. So that was my main aim here. So always have some sort of planning inside what you're creating. And the number 9 mistake that I see a lot of beginners make is the fear of mistakes. Because it's watercolor, it's so difficult, right? But because of that, I think you can see it a bit here. It's very difficult to lay those bold strokes, and you go very lightly, and you're just like, oh, where is this ending up? And it doesn't go anywhere. So I know it's very difficult, but I think this also comes with a bit of practice and creating so many works that you eventually are not scared. I think watercolor does thrive on bold strokes, but also those very soft strokes. So it's really a balance, but they do thrive on those confident, even imperfect ones. The fix, it's easy said than done, but let go of the perfection. Every mistake teaches you something, and I'm still learning on this. I went to another figure painting, drawing painting session yesterday, and I only have 1 hour to stay there because I have a small son that waits for me at home. But you can see I'm not bold enough right here. It's very evident, I know this comes with practice, but I do think I'll be doing a video probably around this concept of fear around art, because I think a lot of us have it. But anyways, I would say that one thing that helped me with my fear in watercolor was from Agnes's workshop, where she was like, it's okay to let go. And if you make a mistake, there were a few things that she did. I did mention this in my podcast as well, but one, with watercolor, just think that you can edit some of the mistakes. And let me show you a tip that I typically do. I know watercolor purists will say that's not the way to go, but this is what I do. The tip that I can give you, apart from like, okay, just like let go of perfection. If you're still like, hey, I can't do that, just always think we can do stuff to go back. So one of the things I do is I use acrylic on top of the mistakes that I've created later on. Okay, that's one. The second one is using magic erasers. Now, if you haven't heard of it, just look them up. It's like they're like this cleaning tool, but when you scrub it on top of watercolor paint, the paint comes off. So you wouldn't be able to like take out the bottom layer. You'll be really erasing out all the layers that's right there until the whites show. So that's one thing to keep in mind. And then the third thing is add water where you've making a mistake, or even blot it out with like kitchen paper towel or whatever cloth you have. Just like soak up what you just laid down there. So those are the things that I do. So it is kind of editable, so to speak, in some sort of way. So I hope that helps. The number 10 mistake that beginners make is lighting. That's right. You would think like, what do you mean? So I have this lighting set up at around like between a cool temperature and a warm temperature, which I mean, when I say warm temperature, it's like, yeah, it's like this. So everything is like yellowish. This is very yellow. So if I paint, say, in this color temperature versus if I paint in a cool temperature, like it's gonna look very different. So say if I were to paint in that very warmish light, then it might, when I go back to normal sunlight, which is pretty much like this, it'll look probably very yellowish toned. The fix is paint in daylight or use a neutral white light. So I'll have it in the description if you're interested. So let me know in the comments which mistakes you've made or you're still working on. So the bonus tip of the mistakes that we make is ignoring the white space. Basically seeing the invisible shape. I think a mistake many of us artists make, including me, is only seeing the painted shapes, not the white space around them. But in watercolor, the untouched white paper is just as important as the painted places. In Japan, we call this sense of space ma, the pause, the gap, the silence that gives meaning to sound and shape. It's like when you turn a painting and then you see a whole different shape that you didn't see before. So I'm still learning this because like leaving that white shape under the eye, above the cheek is one thing that I'm leaving. There's this corner, triangular corner around the nose that I'm leaving white. And I'm trying to see those shapes when I'm painting. Especially, it's very crucial, I figure, drawing open studios, but I'm trying to see those shapes and work around them. Seeing them as a shape and painting around them is quite important and something that I'm still learning because I've used these tools like the white acrylic paint and so forth, like thinking, oh, it'll be okay. But these are just stages, you know. The fix is don't rush to paint the whole page. So pause and notice the shapes of your highlights first and then work light to dark. I suppose that's the tip. And if you want to dive deeper into watercolor, I do have a Skillshare class. One of them is about painting Japanese stacked stone, where we dive into deep around water control and color theory and so forth. So I'm sure you'll find something to learn from that class. I'll have it in the description down below. Just enjoy the process. I know this all takes time, but I hope some of these mistakes that I shared bring some insights for your creative process. Okay, and I'll see you in the next video.